Hey everybody, welcome back to Punching Back with George Papadopoulos. In today's show, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the most consequential, mysterious figure in the entire Spygate scandal, Joseph Mifsud, or as I like to call him, Little Joey. This is a guy that one person on Earth interacted with from the 2016 campaign, and probably one of the only few Americans outside of the intel agencies who actually had conversations with this person before he went underground for the last couple of years. Um, Joseph Mifsud is the Maltese professor that Bob Mueller, Jim Comey, and other pundits in the mainstream media for the last 2 years characterized as a Russian agent who was feeding me information about the Russians possessing Hillary Clinton's emails and attempting to collude with me as an intermediary for the Russian government. Now, this lie, this one lie alone turned this country on its head. We were fed lies about this individual. We were fed lies about what my interactions really were with this person, how I even met him, who his connections were, and how he fits into the whole scandal. And I'm going to, for the first time ever, explain who this person is, how I met him, how he fits into these various reports, and what I expect of his involvement with the Durham probe. Let's look at facts. Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud is not a Russian. This is a Maltese national with extensive ties to Western intelligence apparatuses, including the CIA, the FBI, MI6, and Italian intelligence services. He's not a Russian national. How did I meet this person? In between leaving the Ben Carson campaign and joining the Donald Trump campaign in 2015, I became a director at this company named the London Center for International Law Practice in the UK. This is a company that had absolutely no Russians in there. In fact, it was embedded with ex-Western diplomats, people connected to intel agencies from the US and Europe and Australia, and had zero Russian presence. In fact, one of the directors at this company, something that was unbeknownst to me at the time, who was instrumental in me meeting this person, Joseph Mifsud, used to work with Bob Mueller at the FBI after 9/11, named Arvinder Sambe. So, of course, the mainstream media never told you this in 2017 and 2018, and even now, because it didn't fit the narrative that they were trying to promote and push on us that Donald Trump and his campaign was colluding with Russia and that we were part of this master grand conspiracy against the United States of America. So, as I join this organization and I notify them a couple months later, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave and join the Donald Trump campaign, they became furious. They were telling me, why on earth would you join this guy's campaign? He's a pariah to society, to the world. He's never going to win, and no one here in Europe likes this guy. I said, I think he's going to be the president. And they said, well, if you're going to really leave us, this is the London Center for International Law Practice. We need you to go meet some people who are going to help you on the campaign. So Naji Idris, one of the other directors, brings me into this room with this woman, probably in her mid 50s, never saw her in my entire life. And she says, my name is Arvinder Sambe, and it's my understanding that you're going to be joining the Trump campaign. That's very interesting. And of course, we're not happy about it. But before you go, I have some contacts for you to go meet in Rome who are going to help you with connecting the campaign to various officials and probably help you. Now, this is a key figure that no one, I have never even heard this person's name in any report, probably purposely, because this woman is the key figure who actually brokered the meeting between myself and Joseph Mifsud, and she was connected to Bob Mueller. You could do a simple Google search on this woman, Arvinder Sambe. You could also see that she was connected to Bruce Orr during the 2016 election. This is a serious player that to this day, I don't understand why she has not gained more attention. She says you're going to go to Rome. And in Rome, you're going to go with the London Center for International Law Practice, and it's going to really help you. At that point, I thought I was going on a 4 or 5 day vacation in Rome. I was planning on getting back to New York, and I had no intention of working with these people again. I get to this campus, a university called Link Campus. And as soon as I get to Rome with this company I used to work for, where I'm trying to meet people who are going to help me on the Donald Trump campaign, I'm being chaperoned by Italy's foreign minister, Vincenzo Scotti, who says, "This is the guy that your company wants you to meet, and he's going to help you." I go and I see this mid 50s, not really impressive guy who basically tells me, "Oh, you're Papadopoulos. I've heard a lot about you. We should meet tonight and get dinner." He goes to me and he says, "So you're working on Donald Trump's campaign?" This is mid March 2016. This is before even the Washington Post announced that I had joined the campaign formally. So before, just so everybody understands, before the Washington Post announced my name, I had Italy's foreign minister chaperoning an advisor of a presidential campaign to meet Joseph Mifsud at the instructions of Arvinder Sambe, who used to work with Bob Mueller. Do we understand what's happening here? After I meet Joseph Mifsud for the first time in Rome, I wasn't that impressed with him. He basically tells me, "I know the world, George. I know Putin. I know Boris Johnson. I know the State Department. And if you need assistance, I could broker meetings between the campaign and foreign governments." I heard a lot of stuff like that. I didn't know if he was serious. I get back to London, and the London Center for International Law Practice, the company I was working for, they tell me, "Do you know Joseph Mifsud wants to introduce you to somebody very, very important?" This is mid-March 2016. I said, who does he want to introduce me to?" "The niece of Vladimir Putin." It wasn't Joseph Mifsud who contacted me and told me that, "I want to introduce you to the niece of Vladimir Putin." It was a company I worked for that was embedded, as I explained, with high level ex Western diplomats, including the ex chief of staff of Alexander Downer, who we'll get into at another, this infamous Australian official, MI6 officials, prominent lawyers. And he tells me, this man, Najee Idris, I'll never forget it because it was such a bizarre encounter to have, where you're kind of thinking you're in the middle of almost like a surreal James Bond movie. You're flying into Rome in this incredible university where you're meeting with ex ministers, and you're being chaperoned around to meet, the who's of the diplomatic world. You get back to London, and all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin's niece wants to meet you from this guy that you just met a week ago. So, as a 28-year-old kind of, I guess naive kid person at that time, and thinking that this company was legit that I was working for, which on paper it's very legit, they're saying, "Go meet this guy Mifsud. He's introducing you to Putin's niece. It's the real deal. And you're gonna, gain all the contacts you need with Russia that Donald Trump wants, and it's gonna make you look very good." On March 15th, 2016, I go to the Holborn Hotel. It's a five-star hotel across the street from this company I worked for. And there's this very beautiful girl there with Mifsud. And there was a guy sitting in a chair just staring at both of us, all three of us, actually. And I'll never forget the guy in the corner of my eye. He was just sitting there, leather jacket, bald head with jeans, just staring. And Mifsud says, "This is Olga. She's the niece of the Russian president." And, we're here to basically discuss, your role as an advisor to Donald Trump and what he's talking about regarding Russia and why it's so important for, Donald Trump to promote this US Russia relationship if he wins. And I say, "Yeah, Trump had been talking about it for so long. There's nothing wrong with it considering the candidate had been talking about it." So she extends her hand to me, smiles, doesn't speak English. I'm extending my hand like an idiot, thinking I'm shaking the hand of Vladimir Putin's niece. And we're just talking there. Just, she's probably recording me. She's spying on me. Mifsud is recording this whole conversation, just basically trying to play me. And they're saying, Our contacts here at the Russian embassy in London are aware of this meeting," which of course they weren't aware of it because this wasn't Vladimir Putin's niece. Apparently, she was a manager at a wine store. So, I mean, you're getting the theme here of the the Keystone Cops slash setup, whatever you want to call it here. But later on, we understood that this person was a manager at a wine store in Moscow or something, like a student who was in, and the Russian media had even worse things to say about her. But I'm not going to say that on the podcast. People sometimes forget that it was no mystery that Donald Trump had been openly talking about working with Vladimir Putin at the strategic level to defeat ISIS and to hedge China from probably the day he announced his candidacy in June or July of 2015. So by the time I joined in March of 2016, he had probably mentioned this openness to work with Russia at least 50 times. So, as a foreign policy advisor whose job was to connect the candidate to foreign governments, to write foreign policy speeches for him, and to basically meet with foreign governments to better understand where the U.S. relationship stood with them at that time, it would have been I would have been derelict in my duties, as the FBI likes to say, if I didn't attempt to coordinate a meeting with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump for a photo op. Barack Obama, Mitt Romney, other candidates, even Ben Carson, who I'd worked for, all go on foreign policy trips as candidates to basically show their bona fides to say that if you elect me, I can handle myself on the world stage. And when Donald Trump kept talking about Putin, you know, I'm all of a sudden being introduced to the niece of Vladimir Putin to arrange this meeting in my mind. And in March of 2015, we now know that there had already been an attempt to not only set me up with fake information and fake situations, but to also set the campaign up with the fake Russia story. Considering this entire scenario of Mifsud and Putin's niece was fake, and that the company, the London Center for International Law Practice, who introduced me to Mifsud in Rome by an intermediary of the FBI, lied about why I was supposed to meet this person again. March 2016. Moving forward, what starts to happen, and this is why dates are so important, and unfortunately, even well-meaning conservative pundits or just truth seekers, doesn't matter if you're conservative or liberal, because I always considered my story an American story first and foremost of something that should never happen again. Essentially, the democratic process being violently interfered with, um, is that Mifsud and I meet on March 11th in Rome. On March 17th, I'm meeting the fake niece of Vladimir Putin and him in London. My name is announced to the Washington Post, I believe, on March 21st, 2016. So all of this is happening even before the world knows that I have even joined the campaign. Just think about what that means. There was no proof I was actually officially on a campaign at all. When the foreign minister of Italy is chaperoning me to meet Joseph Mifsud, there's no evidence at all, public evidence, that I'm even joining a presidential campaign when Arvinder Sambe, as I explained, who was connected to Bruce Orr and Bob Mueller, was connecting me to Mifsud. There was no evidence that they even knew that I was formally part of this campaign unless my communications were being tracked in real time. And that's exactly what looks like what's going on. Moving forward, after these meetings, I meet Donald Trump on March 31st in that infamous round circle table where I tell him to his face, I have a guy in London who tells me that he can introduce you to Vladimir Putin, and I think it's a great idea. I think it'd be a great photo op. It'll make you look good, and I could broker this deal for you. I said it right to the candidate's face. It's probably one of the most well-circulated pictures of 2018, where Donald Trump's on one side, Jeff Sessions is on the other. I'm in the middle among 10 other guys. And Trump basically wasn't sure. He wasn't committed either way. But Jeff Sessions was. And Jeff Sessions told me, why don't you go run with this idea? Maybe Jeff Sessions jumped a little too quick into it. I don't know. But he was very enthusiastic with it, to the extent that I actually was so confident in my ability to broker this meeting and that Jeff Sessions wanted me to do it, that I gave him my business card at the end of our meeting. And I said, thank you, Senator, here's my business card. And I hope to be in touch with you. And then I met Stephen Miller there for the first time. And he says, I'm going to run everything to Jeff. Just keep in contact. So it wasn't there's nothing illegal about this proposal of mine of setting up a meeting for a photo op with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It happens all the time. Like I explained, other candidates have gone abroad. So at that table, when I told the candidate I can broker this meeting for you, nothing illegal there. But here's where things start to get very shady. That was March 31st, 2016. On April 20th, 2016, out of the blue, April 20th, the Australian government makes contact with me. Donald Trump never said the word Australia. I've never been to Australia. I have no idea why the Australian government wants to meet with me at a bar to have chicken wings in London on April 20th, 2016. I go and I have a beer and chicken wings with this girl from the embassy there, along with this Israeli diplomat named Christian Cantor. And basically, the Australian diplomat, who is disguised as the girlfriend of the Israeli diplomat, well, you can understand that that was, a fake story, is telling me, George, you know that Donald Trump, this candidate you're working for, he's a real pariah. And in Australia and around the world, his America First agenda is really just poison to our ears. I mean, come on, George, he's not a serious guy. And if he is, we would never work with this person. So on April 20th, 2016, I'm sitting back having my wings and my beer in London, and I'm listening to a U.S. ally from Australia tell me that they do not support the candidate and that he's a pariah. This was a few months after the UK Prime Minister David Cameron went public in the House of Commons and said that Donald Trump is a threat to the world and an idiot. Do you understand this theme I'm trying to get at here of foreign government interference and why US allies had a real axe to grind against the candidate? On April 26th, conveniently 6 days after this meeting, Joseph Mifsud tells me one day over lunch in London, George, I just got back from Russia, and you know what I learned? The Russians have thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, this is very important because the old narrative is that Joseph Mifsud, because he was trying to introduce me to the niece of Vladimir Putin, and that he was trying to set up a meeting between Trump and Putin, even though it was all obviously fake, that he must have been a Russian agent delivering this information to me, which was already speculated around the world, in order to drop this information to the campaign to assure us that Russia was good, that they're going to help the campaign, and moving forward, they're going to attack Hillary Clinton. So, this pre seed of information that later metastasized into the investigation known as Crossfire Hurricane happened on April 26, 2016. Joseph Mifsud delivers the goods on me, telling me that the Russians have Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, here's where things get very, very shady, and why dates are so important, and why the characters involved are so important to get into. Conveniently, a week later, on May 3rd, 2016, I have two officials from the DIA reach out to me, Gregory Baker and Terrence Dudley, who I think have already been interviewed by Attorney General Barr. And they start to tell me, we don't like what's happening with the campaign. Why is the candidate so pro working with Russia? Starting to probe me about my own background, too. I'll never forget Greg Baker, one of the DIA guys, comes up to me, starts speaking Greek to me. My first meeting with him. Oh, yeah, my station was in Salonika. That's where your family's from, right, George? And at that moment, you don't realize that it's odd for these people to know everything about your background. You just kind of assume it. But at that moment, I just thought I was talking to two guys from the US government who were there just to basically pick up my brain about things, and not to essentially spy on me. They're probing me, asking me a lot about my own background in the energy world, about Donald Trump, about the campaign, trying to actually ingratiate themselves within the campaign eventually, which is unheard of. And 2 days after this meeting with the DIA, who wants to meet with me on May 6, 2016? the Israeli diplomat and the Australian diplomat who are apparently dating. They want to basically tell me the same thing. What's Trump up to? What are you up to? What's happening? The day before, the Australians wanted to meet with me again, and the Israeli diplomat wanted to meet with me again after the DIA had just met with me. Do you know what was being openly speculated on Fox News? Let me show you what Judge Napolitano had to say.
Now, look, no less an authority on hacking than General Michael Hayden himself, who at one point ran the CIA and another point ran the NSA, said it is an absolute given that she was hacked by Chinese agents, Russian agents, and even our friends in the Mossad. That's how sensitive the materials were that she used, and that's how vulnerable she was.
So Napolitano in this clip is talking openly on May 5th, 2016, about Hillary Clinton's emails being hacked and being in the hands of the Russians. Openly. We just played the clip. And I just saw Napolitano a couple days ago in New York, and we were kind of openly like laughing that this was already public knowledge at the time. And I'm going to explain to you why it gets even more comical and probably more of a dark comedy now. After this bizarre meeting again over chicken wings and beer with the Israeli and Erica Thompson, the Australian, she emails me, George, it was so great to see you. Oh my goodness, I'm so sad that you're going to be leaving. But before you leave, why don't you come and meet my boss, Alexander Downer? He really wants to meet with you. He knows everybody, and it'll be a great farewell trip for you. I didn't know who the hell Alexander Downer was at that time. I did a simple Google search on this person, and he just was the ambassador of Australia and the UK. I didn't think anything else. Now, this person is anybody but a rando. This is a guy who led the equivalent of the CIA of Australia for over a decade. As Australia's foreign minister, helped funnel off $25 million of hard-earned Australian taxpayer money to none other than the Clinton Foundation, and does not just openly meet with an advisor on a campaign. He's usually meeting with a prime minister or president of some country. I didn't think too much about it. Like I said, I didn't do that Google background, considering he's a representative, as I thought, of a U.S. ally. But at that time, as I've explained, the UK and Australia had been making very open and somewhat tacit threats about Donald Trump's candidacy and his viability as a leader of the free world. On May 10th, 2016, I go and meet Alexander Downer and Erica Thompson, the Australian intel agent woman, on a rainy evening in London at a bar or a high upscale winery, whatever you want to call it, named the Kensington Wine Rooms. Remember the seed that the pre-seed that Joseph Mifsud dropped in my lap about the Russians having Hillary Clinton's emails on April 26, 2016? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the point of the meeting I'm about to describe to you was to retrieve this information to create a conspiracy case against the Donald Trump campaign by leveraging a U.S. ally and a Clinton friend to do it. The stakes were very high. The meeting I'm about to describe now was the most bizarre meeting I ever had in my entire life. And it is I guess, the impetus behind launching an intrusive counterintelligence investigation for the first time in history of a presidential campaign. I sit down, and across from me is Alexander Downer. He's ordering a gin and tonic. I order a gin and tonic at a wine bar. I know, but we order gin and tonics. And as soon as I sit down, he doesn't tell me, "Hi, how are you, George? It's good to meet you." He tells me, "I'm going to tell you something. I want you and your boss, Donald Trump, to leave my good friend, David Cameron, alone." Now, David Cameron was the UK prime minister at the time. He was talking horrible about Trump. And then Trump obviously responded to him, calling him names. And then I was attacking him too in the British press. It was kind of a chaotic couple days around that time. And I told Alexander Downer, I was thinking, why is this guy talking about the UK if he's Australian, first of all? And second of all, why is he making this threat to me? And then all of a sudden, he pulls out his phone and he holds it up like this to me. As he's looking into my eyes, he pulls out his phone. I right away think he's recording me or spying on me. I almost laughed at it. I was like, why is this guy so open about what he's doing? I mean, I'm not hiding anything. This is just off. Something really weird about this person. He starts to get into questions like all the other individuals, the DIA, Joseph Mifsud, and others about my background and the campaign and, what they were thinking on China and Russia, etc. And every time he would ask a question, he would pull his phone out. I wasn't leading this discussion. I was there to respond to questions from a senior level diplomat of Australia. And allegedly, at this conversation, at this meeting, as he's asking me questions about Russia, Clinton, Obama, what my thoughts are on XYZ, he records me apparently saying, oh, the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. So think about what's going on here. I just played a clip from Judge Napolitano on Fox News from May 5th, 2016, openly in front of probably 2-3 million people, suggesting that the Russians have real dirt on Hillary Clinton and they've hacked her emails. On May 10th, as this guy is recording my conversation and spying on me, for who we don't understand quite yet, and that's what John Durham is looking into, I say to him allegedly, which I have no memory of, that the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. He smiles, puts his phone away, gets up, I get up, we leave. The information from this odd meeting I had with this Clinton friend was the impetus, according to the Comey FBI, for launching an intrusive counterintelligence investigation into a presidential campaign for the first time in history. You could understand why John Durham and William Barr took the extraordinary steps to basically refute the IG. And I'm going to play a clip here from the Attorney General himself over a recent interview regarding this exact topic. Of course, not into the details where I'm essentially alleging that this person was there to spy on me, but the Attorney General had some terse words for this person and for the whole situation.
So in May 2016, apparently a 28-year-old campaign volunteer says in a social setting...
This is George Papadopoulos.
This is George Papadopoulos. And this was described by the foreign official who heard him, as who couldn't remember exactly what was said, but it was characterized as a suggestion of a suggestion. He suggested that there had been a suggestion from the Russians that they had some adverse information to Hillary, which they might dump in the campaign. Well, what was going on in May? You may recall that we were in the thick of the investigation of Hillary Clinton's secret server. And the media was full of stories, and the blogosphere was full of stories, and political circles in Washington were full of stories and speculation that the Russians had, in 2014, 2 years before, hacked into her secret server and were therefore in a position to drop this stuff during the election. In fact, the day before this comment was made in a bar, Fox News was reporting that their sources told them there was a debate going on in the Russian government as to whether or not to drop the Hillary Clinton's emails between the intelligence agency and the foreign ministry. But that related to Hillary's server. So the FBI, what the FBI did is later, after the DNC hack and the dumping through Wikipedia in July.
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks, yeah. WikiLeaks. In July, they get this information that this somewhat vague statement was made in a bar. And they jumped right into a full-scale investigation before they even went and talked to the foreign officials about exactly what was said. They opened an investigation of the campaign, and they used very intrusive techniques. They didn't do, I think, what would normally be done under those circumstances, which is to go to the campaign. And there certainly were people in the campaign that could be trusted, including a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the governor of New Jersey, former U.S. attorney. There were people to talk to. And what I find particularly inexplicable is that they talked to the Russians, but not to the presidential campaign. On August 4th, Brennan braced the head of Russian intelligence. He calls the head of Russian intelligence and says, "We know what you're up to, you better stop it." He did it again later in August, and then President Obama talked to President Putin in September and said, "We know what you're up to, you better cut it out." So they go and confront the Russians, who clearly are the bad guys, and they won't go and talk to the campaigns and say, what is this about?
The AG, William Barr, confirmed what we now know, that this story was already out in the public at the time that this meeting was happening. It's my opinion that the reason the Australians were so keen on meeting so quickly between May 6th and May 10th again is because this info was already out there. This info was out there, and they needed to retrieve it very quickly from somebody connected to the campaign. And that's why the Australians were there, to record a conversation and to veer a conversation into this rumor that was already public for years, apparently, according to the Attorney General. But people, we keep forgetting, though, William Barr mentions this conversation, but we always omit or conveniently forget, meaning the mainstream media, that Joseph Mifsud was the guy who told me about this information. And if Joseph Mifsud was not working for the Russians, then who was he working for? And during the IG testimony to the Senate a couple days ago, Senator Johnson had a pointed question that he asked the IG about where Mifsud's loyalties laid when he told me this information in April 2016. Let's hear what he had to say, and let's see what the IG had to say as a response.
According to James Comey's May 28, 2019 op-ed in the Washington Post, Joseph Mifsud, unnamed at the time, was a, quote, Russian agent. Again, did you find anything in the FBI documents that would support James Comey's conclusion about that?
I want to be careful on that, because I think if I answer either way, I might be touching on information I'm not sure I can speak to in this setting.
Okay.
But let me be clear, we certainly would have looked to see what the FBI.
We'll follow up in a different setting.
So what we just had right now is the IG in front of the American public not able or willing to answer a very simple question. Who was Joseph Mifsud working for? If it wasn't the FBI and not the Russians. So I thought that was very bizarre. If he wasn't working for the Russians, or if he was working for the Russians, it'd be very simple to say it. I mean, let's not forget, Bob Mueller indicted 12 or 14 Russian hackers that are never going to face a U.S. trial, and he was very happy to put that out there. But Joseph Mifsud was never indicted by Bob Mueller, and the IG right now just said that I can't confirm or deny who he was working for. And this really gets into the key element moving forward, and what we're really going to dive into. It's what is John Durham really looking into? And what is this new investigation all about? And in my opinion, and somebody who's lived this story and understand really where this is going, this was never about the FBI. The FBI was not running the show here. This was a CIA operation that was weaponizing U.S. government allies abroad to do their dirty work and to set the campaign up. Joseph Mifsud was not a Russian agent, okay? He was, his allegiances and his ties were to the Italian government. when John Durham and William Barr traveled to Italy a month and a half ago to learn about Joseph Mifsud from Italian officials. The day after that, the Durham probe evolved into a criminal matter. Okay, and what the AG stated just a couple days ago on the Martha McCollum show is that the IG did a good job, but he didn't have the ability to really get into what this matter was really all about. And I'm going to play the AG's words right here, so you could understand what they're looking into compared to what the IG was able to do himself.
Durham's investigation is broader scoped in terms of the intelligence agencies that are being looked at.
Oh, yes. He's not just looking at the FBI. He's looking at other agencies and also private and departments and also private actors. And so it's a much broader investigation. And also he's not just looking at the FISA aspect of it. He is looking at all the conduct, both before and after the election.
If it was true that this investigation really was launched based on this bizarre conversation I had with Alexander Downer, the IG would be the end of this very horrible chapter in American history. But it's not. It's the beginning of a new chapter. And Barr and Durham have not only refuted the key conclusions of the IG, that one, there was a legal justification for opening up the investigation, and two, how it actually started, but Barr is here on national television explaining that we're looking into the CIA. And it's always been my theory, based on my interactions with these key players, what my own background is in the political world, that the CIA was all over me. And Joseph Mifsud was clearly being worked by the CIA to throw this dirt in my lap to then try and destroy the Trump campaign. So just to summarize what we talked about here today, because I know we covered a lot of topics a lot of people probably have never even heard or quite understand. And it seems from the clips I played here, maybe not even some people in the U.S. government understand what was really going on here. Before even the Washington Post knew I joined the Trump campaign, officials connected to Bob Mueller, the FBI, Italian intelligence knew I was joining the Trump campaign. I meet Joseph Mifsud at a school that's connected and trains the CIA in Rome. Joseph Mifsud, on April 26th, drops the info about emails in my lap. However, on April 20th is when the Australians made contact with me for the first time. The DIA makes contact a week after Joseph Mifsud drops the info in my lap, and then the Australians want to meet with me 2 times again after that, all with the simple goal to extract this information that Joseph Mifsud told me about Russia having Hillary Clinton's emails, which, as we now know, was not a secret. We weren't talking about state secrets here. We were talking about rumors that had been circulating since 2014, according to the Attorney General, and were being openly discussed on Fox News at that exact same time. This was a setup. When the president calls this a witch hunt, I don't think it goes far enough. This was a pre-planned, orchestrated attack against our campaign for one reason and one reason only, and that was to tie Donald Trump to the Russians in a nefarious way that was never the intent of the campaign. Foreign allies were involved. The Australian government was involved. It's no coincidence that Donald Trump has called out the UK and Australia to be investigated by John Durham and William Barr. Moving forward, we're going to start to see a lot more about what this meeting really was all about between myself and Joseph Mifsud, and myself and the Australian government. No coincidences, everybody. Stay tuned for more. Himalaya has been incredibly helpful in helping launch this podcast, and I encourage all of my supporters and all the viewers of this podcast to actually go and subscribe to the podcast on the Himalaya app. And if you want to be extra supportive of the podcast and really help me grow this to where it really has to be to impact the 2020 election, which is really the goal of this podcast, subscribe for premium content. In premium content for $4.99, we're going to be including Q&A, bonus content, and other interviews. Stay tuned, keep watching, and help me grow this all around the country. Thanks so much.